So this is a real nerve center for the U.S. government.
Absolutely.
Was your grandfather involved with any of this out here?
He was in that bunker right there. This is the test site itself in front of us.
They put us in this encampment in the desert.
Do you know about Operation Paperclip?
The Nazis, the scientists,
Yeah.
Werner von Braun. Oh yeah, fully aware. I don't think enough people know that story.
He showed me on a globe. I have the globe at home. He took his finger and he said that was a future target set. New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C.
That was taken at a NASA event. This is my mother, this is my father, and this is Dr. von Braun.
There's a lot of money in Huntsville.
Yes.
Look at these places. They're huge. Das Mars Project.
Yeah, this is his thesis on the flight to Mars.
I was just transported into another world for a little bit. That's what that felt like.
Absolutely.
Morning, guys. This is not your stereotypical Deep South Alabama story. This is the story of Huntsville, a place where the US government secretly recruited 1,600 German scientists, engineers, technicians to help develop this city from a once small sort of provincial place into a hub of aerospace, technology, and defense. So today we're meeting up with a man who's the offspring from one of these original German families. He said, Peter, I can bring you into the wild stories and the history of what built Huntsville and why it is the way it is today. Let's do this.
If you see that structure in the distance, that is the Saturn V engine test stand, where the Saturn V...
Oh, that structure way out there?
Yes.
Okay.
With the Saturn V engines for the moon mission in the 1960s. And that structure is being restored and is in use by Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, for the construction of their new rocket engine, which they are testing there now.
And so 1,600 German scientists, engineers.
125.
Okay, why am I reading 1,600 everywhere?
I don't know. The original assembly of German engineers and scientists numbered 125. That was the initial core group that came at the beginning.
And that was your grandfather?
Yes, he was a part of that team. They were essentially captured. They surrendered to the U.S. forces.
So at that time, it was the Americans and the Soviets trying to grab all the scientists from Germany, right?
Absolutely. The United States did not have that technology. As it was explained to me by my grandfather, there were future developments that were underway that have really never been released to public knowledge. And that was a prime consideration for the basically the capture of the German team members, the rocket team members, so the U.S. could capitalize on their research and plans.
So their choice was either you go with the Americans or go with the Soviets.
Well, a large number of the team were captured by the Soviets, and that was the foundation of the Soviet space program. So basically you had Germans working on weapon systems against their co-worker Germans from Germany. Except I understand the Russians, my understanding is that they observed, they recorded and documented all the knowledge they could glean from those Germans that they had in their possession, they had captured, and then at some point they just released them back to war, demolish Germany, because they wanted their own space program.
Okay.
And the reason that we probably ended up beating them in the space race, okay, was because they did release their German team members, and we kept ours here in the United States and let them go full development for the Saturn V missile to the moon.
Do you think they were, like, your grandparents were being monitored? Like, there was a lot of oversight, seeing how they lived, hoping, making sure they weren't double agents working for the Nazis at that time? Or Germany was so smashed, it was, like, not even a consideration?
Well, I mean, once they were captured, they were vetted by the OSS.
Okay.
Which is the Office of Strategic Services at the time, and that's the precursor agency to the Central Intelligence Agency. And so they were vetted. Whether or not those individuals, the Paperclip team members, represented any type of future risk to the United States. So they had to pass the vetting exercise.
Okay. So your grandfather was an engineer?
That's correct.
Okay, so he was an engineer before the Nazi
Yes.
government came into
Yes,
power.
a civilian.
Okay, so when you're in that position, you have no choice, right? You gotta be with whatever the Nazi government says, or what's going to happen, or how did that work? Do you know?
Well, he told me that the country was in shambles before the war, and I asked him very hard questions because I am a retired U.S. Army officer, and I was in the programs at the time, young officer, lieutenant, and I asked him what it was like, and how did this happen?
Right.
And he explained, his perspective. You understand, back in those days, that there is no media. Okay, it's all state-controlled media by radio only in a country like that. So the basic German only knows what they're told via the media that they have, the outlet, which is radio and newspapers.
Right.
They were trying to rebuild their economy, but then of course there's always conflict, and he was offered employment into that program, which was a saving grace for the family because there was no food and there was no money. And so my grandfather did explain that once they were involved in the program and as the war developed, they were under strict control and supervision by elements of the German government. And he told me at one time it got so bad because the missiles kept exploding. They'd launch them and they'd blow up. They had problems with expansion of the liquid propellant in the fuselage.
Okay.
And they were told if that continued to happen, then they would be building tanks for the war effort.
They would be building.
They'd be building tanks.
Manually building.
Manual
tanks.
labor building tanks for the war effort if their rockets didn't work.
So at that point in time, they had no choice to do the work. They had to do the work.
Oh, once they were at Peenemünde, they were locked in.
What is it, Peenemünde?
Peenemünde is the name of the research facility on the North Sea, North Germany.
Okay.
And that was it because it was over on the coastline, so they could launch rockets and they could when they do blow up or go out of control, they land in the ocean. It's the Redstone test site for the Jupiter C Redstone rockets that launched satellites and astronauts in space. 1958, 1961, Alan Shepard. This is the blockhouse where the launch control people would sit and test the rocket engines, and this is the test site itself in front of us. And it has been, I see now, repainted and cleaned up with an actual rocket on the pad.
So was your grandfather involved with any of this out here?
He was in that bunker right there with them, yes. Oh, yeah. There was nothing else here but this.
So Theo, we're on a massive compound.
Yes,
Massive.
we are. Yes,
And you said camera down the whole time.
that's correct.
Okay.
But at this point, this is a tourist site, and if you were to sign up for a tour at the Space and Rocket Museum, the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, they will take you out here with tourists. They'll come to this site and potentially other places that are no longer in use. They're historically designated, and they're open for exhibit.
Okay, but this compound, massive new FBI building.
That's correct.
We just passed that.
Yes.
What else is out here?
There's a lot of intelligence agencies that are here working technologies. There's space weapon systems being developed, and there's Missile Defense Agency is here. The Space Shuttle Payload Operations.
Big NASA building.
NASA Marshall Space Flight Center is headquartered in Redstone Arsenal.
What is this tower over here? Is that for a rocket?
I don't know.
They're building something.
It's an old NASA stand, as is that.
How many acres are we talking this place?
Oh, the Arsenal's, I don't know, 29,000 acres, so it's huge.
So this is a real nerve center for the U.S. government.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
like
it's
one
a
of the
think tank.
one of the big ones.
It is
in the country.
Yes.
Okay, so does a V2 look like this?
It's much smaller.
And so your grandfather, who worked on the V2,
yes,
you were telling me that it stood for something. In German, what did it mean?
The V stood for Vergeltungswaffen, which means revenge weapon.
And the Germans were firing the V2 at the end of the war, right? Into the UK?
Into the UK.
Into Belgium?
Into Belgium, en masse, yes. Into the UK. And he told me that the largest challenge they had with that missile was guidance systems.
Okay.
Because they didn't have, there were no satellites and no GPSs. They used gyroscopes. So they had to be situated properly on the terrain, aimed properly, and then the gyros had to be calibrated properly, and then they launched them, and they went off on their own. And they were basically an area weapon, not a precision strike weapon.
Okay, but it was technology the West didn't have and the Soviets didn't have.
That is correct.
It was far ahead of everything else.
They were using, I understand the Russians had multiple launch rocket systems that were on portable tracked vehicles that would launch in the battlefield.
Okay.
Limited range, but they were, these V2s had the capability to go, over to the English mainland and into that area too. And so the goal was always to develop a delivery platform for some payload to go further and with more accuracy, which they were actually working on when the war ended. They were developing a multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile.
Why were the Germans so far ahead?
Well, I just think that they have a unique, intricate interest, and their minds seem to be tuned to work towards, a high technology solution to a hobby, because rocketry was a hobby back in those days, even in the United States.
A hobby?
Yes.
What, like your little model rockets?
Yes.
As kids?
Yes, they were here too, but not to the degree of perfection that the Germans were working on.
Theo, you're very strict about the camera out here, so keep it down, down, down until we go to these tourist sites.
Yeah. Imagine you're a tourist in a tourist bus. They'll tell you can come and take pictures when we get out of the bus. They don't want you filming the buildings.
Nothing over there.
And the building numbers. You see, that identifies a location. I mean, for obvious reasons.
Right.
Rocket Park. These were rockets that were developed here. Now, the one on the left looks like a V2, but it's not. I think
that smaller one there?
Yeah, that's the Hermes missile.
So this is a new world for me. Where am I wrong here? Where am I right? The NASA was mostly German engineers in the beginning?
Well,
what percentage?
The group that controlled all of the development of the space vehicle development were the German engineers. In fact, I understand that Werner von Braun ordered them that they had to quit speaking German at work because the Americans they had under them didn't understand what they were talking about. So they were training.
Well, let's stop here because I don't want to record up there.
Right.
So is that disrespectful towards the American servicemen that fought in the war, and all of a sudden you have all these Germans over here working in your government, or people just get over things really quickly, and that's how it works?
Well, my dad was a U.S. engineer. He went to University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
He was a World War II veteran in the Japanese theater, and I understand that, and he was under the Germans, here, as were all the American engineers. There were no Americans in charge of anything.
Really? From what year to what year?
I don't know when that ended, actually. It was after, okay, it actually ended after the successful landing of Man on the Moon, 1969.
So you're saying after World War II to 69, the Germans were running the show here?
Absolutely.
But they Americanized.
Dr. Werner von Braun was running the show here.
Yeah, but they Americanized.
Yes. They were given naturalization citizenships.
That was a risky move, don't you think, by the U.S. government?
Yes, I understand. And it was told to me the other day that even Dr. von Braun was not allowed to possess a top secret security clearance. Yet.
Okay, but these were all men that worked for the Nazis. They were part of the Nazi regime.
Yes, they were employed under their special weapons programs as contractors.
And they knew what was going on in Germany. They agreed with it, or it's hard to know. It's hard to get into their heads.
Well, I was told that they're living in secure sites, working in secure facilities. They really didn't know what was going on around them outside where they were, because they were working on development of propulsion systems or airfoils, airframes, structures, and whatnot. But the war was raging. So they were building, a delivery platform for a weapon, for a warhead.
You don't think they knew what the war was for? Like concentration camps in Poland, they didn't have an understanding of, you think? Or
They did not.
Really?
No, they did not. But they did have some labor associated with the building of the missiles that were prisoners.
So they sort of knew what was going on.
Yes.
So wild.
It is.
How humans operate, right?
That is true. But
I mean, it's not a direct comparison, but it's like Iraq. If you're in the Army, you're told to go.
Right, I went.
You went?
Absolutely.
How was that?
It was not fun. It was hard. People died. They got hurt.
Did you agree with it, the war, or no?
Well, at some point in time, we were involved, in obvious hostilities. And we were there as a support unit with the National Guard. So at that point, we didn't even think about ideology anymore. It was all about doing your job and staying alive.
Okay.
You don't worry about ideology when you're there, because America is not there with you. They are in spirit, maybe. They are, but, the supplies and flow, but you're physically located at another country, engaged in hostilities with them.
And it's just day by day, right?
And it's day by day.
Get
It's
through
game
this day.
on. It's game on.
Okay, now looking back on that conflict, do you agree with us going there or not?
I really don't know, what the real premise was to invade into Iraq. I thought it should have been centric to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because of the bin Laden, obvious, control, and he was the aggressor.
They sold this on, they were tied together.
Right. So I'm in no position to actually have information to question any decision made above me at my level as just an aviator.
Right.
So I went and did my job the best way I knew how.
Yep.
You have to follow the principles that were taught to us in our academies. The rules of war and how you handle people, personnel, your own, enemy combatants, prisoners, wounded individuals. We have all these conventions. The Geneva Convention is the biggest one, and the rules of land and air warfare that we're trained in that we have to prosecute. We have to prosecute those actions with our soldiers.
Yep.
So, otherwise, we are subject to prosecution and internment at the federal penitentiary, the military correctional barracks at Fort Leavenworth. At the time of my deployment, I was serving in the National Guard as a civilian employee and a member of a unit as a maintenance test pilot. And our organization received a mobilization order initiated by President Bush Jr., and it was for a period of 2 years. And we had less than 20 hours to report for duty, packed to leave for 2 years. And I did.
How scary was that?
It was pretty interesting because there's supposed to be more lead time, but the disconnect between the National Guard and the regular Army is obvious
So
at
you're
that
just
point.
I mean, if you have a family, did you have a...
At the time, I was not married. I had a home, lived alone. I had to abandon everything in place. My mother and family, personal friends, accountants set up powers of attorney with me and with my mom and to my mother for my estate in case I didn't come back.
And you just got to go,
and
24 hours.
I was gone the next morning, and I didn't see anyone for a year and a half.
So we're going to get to talk to your mother?
Yes. You get to talk to her.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
It's like living in the country, but you're in the city. Hello, Mom.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello,
Mom.
ma'am.
This is Peter.
Nice
Hi,
to meet
Peter.
you.
I'm Gisela.
Gisela, nice to meet
I'm
you.
Theo's mother. And
Okay.
this is my medical associate and trusted friend.
Trusted
Yeah.
friend. You need those in life. That's
Yes,
important.
Yes, yes.
Oh, and who's this?
This is Missy.
Missy is so cute.
Our rescue dog.
Holzhausen is my mother's grandfather from her mother's side. And he was an officer in the German military in the 1890s and early 1900s as a military governor in the German colony, African colony of Tanga, which is now Tanzania. And he was involved in combat there with against other colonial powers.
That was probably taken at a NASA event. Let's see, what does it say here? To my friend and something else. This is my mother, this is my father, and that's Dr. von Braun.
Dr. von Braun
He
was
was the director. He was the director of NASA. NASA began as the National Aeronautics Advisory Committee. I think they called it NACA. And then at some point it morphed into NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And so Dr. von Braun was the first director of NASA up until after the moonshot successful landing of man on the moon.
That's just me and my dog.
Wendy.
that's here in Huntsville.
Yes,
Do you remember Germany?
yes. I went to school there. My father worked in Peenemünde, and they developed the V-2 rocket there. my family decided that my mother, I had a twin sister who's deceased, that we not move to Petermünde. So we spent a lot of summers there because my father thought it was a little bit too dangerous for us to live there. We stayed in a small town near Detmold, north central Germany, and lived in an apartment upstairs, somebody's house. And so when the war ended, we didn't know whether my dad was alive or not, you know. It took quite a while, and all of a sudden he appeared. And we couldn't believe it, you know. And then here came, I remember coming home from school, and there was we were in the British sector at the time. And there was a British truck there, a military truck in front of our building, and put us in that truck, in the back of the truck, and whatever little furniture we had, and said we were going to another place. So we got on the train and went to Landshut, which is in the foothills of the Bavarian mountains, and stayed there in encampments. The men had already gone to America, and we were left in this encampment.
The men, as in the scientists, engineers.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, they were taken to the U.S.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think von Braun's group decided to, when they left Petermünde, to go south, away from the Russians. They preferred to be captured by the Americans or whatever, rather than Russians. We lived in Landshut, I guess, 3 years or something like that, until they put us on this hospital ship. And it took 3 weeks, but we weren't allowed to contact anybody, talk with anybody. I remember when we finally got to New York, and we had to wait for our train car, separate train car, that we rode in. You know, they attached us to different trains from New York to El Paso. And a couple came by, and they heard us speaking German. And there was always military police with us. And they told the people not to talk to us. And it wasn't long after they came back and had a sack full of candy. And I've never eaten such delightful sweets in my entire life. You know, candy was unheard of back in the war in Germany. And there were our fathers waiting. They had spent a little more than a year in White Sands, New Mexico, in the desert there. And they all looked like they weighed 100 pounds more than they did the year before, because they were stuck in the desert there. There was nothing to do for them, basically, you know, for excitement. So they made furniture for us, because we, you know, didn't have any furniture or anything when we came over. And I remember my dad, his biggest love was music. And he played in symphonies wherever he lived. And he was allowed to include the cello, you know, to bring to the States. And I slept on a cello box for about 3 years. Called it my bed. So they put us in this encampment in the desert. No sooner did we get there, they brought American teachers into this encampment for us children. And they Americanized us as quickly as possible.
How did they do that?
Oh, like we learned to pledge allegiance, couldn't speak English. You know, in my country, 'tis o' thee, and we couldn't speak the language, but we ad-libbed it, and it was interesting. So when September came, they put us on a bus with military police again, put us in a public school in El Paso. And we were welcomed as children. I think they probably knew that there was some foreigners coming and they're harmless. And we thrived in that school, did very well, you know. So we lived there, 3 years? And then we were told that our dads were being transferred to a place very similar to the foothills of Germany. Huntsville, Alabama, a small town, I think, 29,000 population. And my dad became a founding member of the Huntsville Symphony. Then we rented a house, and the owner would come once a month to collect his rent, but he never spoke to us. He'd just say thank you and leave. Until after 3 years, when my dad bought a new house, just built in I think it was in the $7,000 bracket. We just thought that was living the life because we'd never owned anything really before.
Did people know of Operation Paperclip here? The locals, the local Americans? Or was that sort of a secret thing nobody really had an understanding of?
I guess some people did, but maybe the city fathers, but other than that, we were just technical people arriving from Germany, the enemy country. But we were okay. We didn't make any trouble.
Have you lost some of your German, or do you still speak fluent German?
Perfect.
Alles klar?
Aha, und wie klar? Kann nicht klarer sein. No, I just, I figured when I had children, there wasn't much I could give them, but I could give them the knowledge of German, my native language.
How has the U.S. been for you?
For me, oh, so good, so good. Coming, foreigners to Huntsville, they accepted us here. They were very accommodating, hospitable. We built this house. It was in the country back then. That was 53 years ago. And I've been in this house ever since.
And you're 63 years old?
You wish. I wish. I'm 86, pushing 90. Isn't that wonderful? I've had my happiest times in my life here, my saddest times in my life here. And I just wouldn't have it any other way.
This is where the original Germans were staying a lot.
Yeah, they would live here.
Okay, in these smaller homes?
Yes, that's correct. I believe their home was that one.
Your grandfather's?
Yes, he lived in this house. Now, let's say this. In the last 5 years, a lot of work's been done to a lot of these homes, and the original residents have been displaced.
Just the value's gone up, or what?
Yes. 4 years ago, you buy properties here, and you'll double your money in a year, easily, by doing nothing. And so, because they've just run out of places to live. But you see, these are mill houses. We had numerous mills here, cotton mills. Everybody that worked here back in the 1930s worked for the company in the company store. They were paid in company money.
Like scripts? Like scrip?
Yes.
Like with the coal mines?
Well, they worked for the cotton mills.
The cotton mill had scrip also?
Yes. This is a cotton mill community.
Oh my God.
And it just, they're all the same size dimensionally. Now the mill is long ago, it's called the Dallas Mill. Okay. The Dallas Mill is no longer standing. There is one building, but it's now an art center. My daughter sells candles in there.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know what scrip is, it's the payment system by the factory or the coal mine company or the plantation company, right?
Yes.
And so they're paid in this scrip, this currency that can only be used at the stores owned by the company.
The company store.
Right, so the money works nowhere else.
Correct.
You're stuck.
That's it.
You're stuck with them. And that went on here until when?
Well, I think the 1950s.
Nah.
40s.
Come on.
30s.
That long?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't know exactly.
I don't know exactly.
Okay, someone knows in the comments, please let us know.
What you see here is all new construction. That's office space, and it's been built within the last year and a half. Down the street is what once was Butler High School, where my mother went to high school, graduating 1955, the Butler Rebels. I took my mother here 2 years ago, and she walked through for the first time since high school, straight to Ale Brewery. owned by Bruce Weddendorf, 30-year NASA engineer. And she said, everything is different except the concrete floors. And that she pointed to the principal's office, and it said tattoo parlor on the door. The bar was made from the bleachers in the gymnasium.
Okay.
And the gym is back here. As you can see,
Oh, wow.
they're brewing in here. And so this was the high school gym that my mother used to go to watch games, basketball and whatever.
Oh, yeah, the scoreboard's still up. This place has changed rapidly, huh? Over the years?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
At nighttime, this takes off.
Oh yeah. This whole strip is super busy.
So most of the people coming here work in aerospace, defense contractors.
Defense contracting is big. Boeing, Intergraph, the Arsenal. The footprint of the Arsenal is about the same size as Huntsville. Half of our lunch menu or lunch customers during the week are people from out of town, from DC mainly.
What's your feel about Huntsville these days?
I like the way it's going, but I was born and raised here. I'd kind of like to slow up a little bit. I miss my small town, but you know, other than that, I'm for it. I'm for progress. I'm for growth. It could slow down a little bit though.
You agree?
I concur from here, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's harder to find somebody born and raised here.
I went to Weatherly Elementary and Weisman Middle
Okay.
School in the Grissom,
Okay.
you know,
I was
60s and 70s.
Colonial Hills, Lakewood,
Yeah.
Calvary Hills, Lee High School.
Mom lived in Colonial Hills, too. Their first house was out there.
Okay.
Yeah, when they first came here.
Do you know about Operation Paperclip? Do you know much about
Bringing
it?
the Nazis, the scientists,
Yeah.
Werner von Braun. Oh yeah, fully aware.
You know? Do most people know that story, or?
I don't think so. I don't think enough people know that story, but yeah, I don't think they do.
What's your take on it?
I like the progress they made, but I don't know if it's necessarily right to bring Nazis over to help us. It's like forgiving them for in exchange for information. I don't think it's a good thing. We would have eventually made the progress we needed to make without them, I think.
They have a lot of discussions out at the university about that topic, and a lot of yelling goes on back and forth in town.
Okay, so it's a bit controversial.
Yes,
in
it
town.
is. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
For those that know,
Okay, so he's against it.
clearly.
Yeah.
Right.
How does that make you feel? Did you?
Doesn't bother me at all. Well, I faced that when I was an Army officer. You know, they knew my background as well. My first assignment as an aviator in a combat aviation battalion, I was assigned as a liaison in Germany to the 35th West German Panzer Brigade. They put me in a Panzer unit because I was a U.S. Army officer that was fluent in German with a vetted background. And they had a hard time accepting me also in the Panzer unit.
So that doesn't bother you.
It happened to me in Germany,
So you're just
in the
used to
German
it.
army.
You're used to it.
Lifelong, yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time. So we're close to the entrance to the speakeasy.
Okay. Okay.
Can you show me where it is?
The entrance to the speakeasy is
Yeah.
right here, obviously. No. Oh.
Loose lips sink ships.
Well, that's the other room. I gotta stay to here?
No, there's a door right here. But you can't get in there.
You've gone too far.
I've gone too far.
Yeah.
Entrance to the speakeasy.
I'll tell you where it is.
Where is it?
It's right behind you.
I was saying that, but it's that goes
It
right
slides. The whole
to the,
thing slides
but it goes
out.
right to. Oh, there is a. Yeah.
And there he is, the gatekeeper.
This is so cool.
This is the old band room.
So this is just a party zone late night.
Oh yes. A lot of private parties, more extensive cocktails. We feature our absinthe in here. We make all our own liquor. Old gym floor, old bleachers. That whole thing is all old bleachers.
It's beautiful. How long you worked here?
5.5 years. It's one of the best jobs I've ever had.
Good community here in
Oh,
Huntsville?
absolutely. I love Huntsville. I'm biased, but
So a little bit north of here, we're talking Appalachia. A little bit south of here, it's deep south.
Yep.
What is this? It's sort of like this hybrid zone, I would say.
it is. This is a melting pot city
Okay.
because you do have you know, the mountain folk, the deep city, you know, the deep rednecks. I like to think of Huntsville, if Alabama's the heart of Dixie, Huntsville's the heart of Alabama. You know, that's the way I like to look at it.
I'm sure Montgomery and Birmingham wouldn't agree.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't, but.
At Fairhope, definitely not.
Oh, definitely not. But I think there's a reason why we're growing and they're not. You know,
Because you have the jobs.
absolutely, and we accept the outsiders. You know, we want people to move here from California, Texas, Washington, wherever.
I think we've hit our limit.
I say all is welcome.
All is welcome.
All is welcome.
All right, as long as they're respectful and
Yeah, absolutely. I find the longer people from out west up north live here, they get more accustomed to the slower pace, how polite people are on a normal basis. You know, Southern hospitality is definitely a thing. It's not dead.
it's happening here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Not the pretentious style, but the real deal.
The real deal. Yeah, I can't walk through a Publix or a Home Depot without getting into 5 different conversations with absolute strangers. If people need stuff, we're still there to help. You know, somebody's short a couple bucks at the gas station, just throw it onto mine. I got you.
Yeah,
Just pay it forward.
that's cool. Even with all this development. That's great.
I would like to think that we rub off on people if you're here long enough.
That was an interesting moment in there where he's, you know, against what happened.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
And
commonplace.
And you grew up here.
Yeah.
You didn't grow up in Germany.
No.
And we're all products of our circumstances and conditions.
Yes.
But you handle it very well.
I'm used to it. You just don't talk about it.
But you're talking about it.
Well, I'll talk about it. I talk about it openly to a lot of people, but a lot of folks are uncomfortable with the conversation. You know, I mean,
Right.
I have a government security clearance. Yeah. And I was asked questions before, and I say, "How old do you think I am? Do I look like I was somewhere there?" And this conversation just stops. What was going on in 1959 when I was being born in Alabama? Then they can't answer that. Then their face turns red.
Oh, right. Because segregation was full on in 59 down here.
Well, oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, you know, but this town was
Separate
absolutely
schools, everything.
polarized. It was when I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the south end of town.
And so the kin of those plantation owners are still here
Absolutely.
living on that land.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have the ultimate comeback when someone hits you on this one.
Yeah, I just don't bring it up. I could. Maybe if I drank 2 of the monkey knots, I'll go back and bring it up again.
Go straight to ale and drop
Straight
that?
up drink a monkey knot and say, hey, and then ask Bruce to come out, the owner. You know, I wouldn't do that. But you're right. I just ignore the entire conversation. So we're headed towards the big spring. That's the foundation of the city. To the right is
Okay.
downtown. The sign explains it all.
Pure water was a marvel to Indian and frontiersmen alike prior to the 19th century. John Hunt. That's where the name
Huntsville.
comes from. Okay, gotcha. Major attraction, spring water being pumped 96 feet through hollowed cedar logs. So this is great water. Maybe not.
Before the geese.
Before
and
the
ducks.
geese, yeah.
From the source.
Oh, this is beautiful. Right smack in the center.
Years and years ago, it was just a rock wall here. And so
Okay.
it had a wire mesh cage in the front. These stairs weren't here. And so the spring feeds out. I think right now it's coming from that crack over there. You know, but it's a fresh water supply. And it's been explored by the National Speleological Society, who are headquartered here in Huntsville. And so they never found the end of it. It goes for miles. The building behind you is the First Alabama Bank.
Uh-huh.
That was robbed by Jesse and Frank James.
No way.
They said they escaped, jumped out through that door. Here's the triangular building that I could have bought for $30,000.
This building right here.
Yes.
30,000.
Yes.
When?
That was in the early 1980s. Everything was for
Explain
sale,
it, Stalin.
cheap.
So the 80s was a down cycle here, and then it just took
Absolutely.
off. Took off ever since?
It was all for sale, dirt cheap.
So 50s, 60s, 70s, thriving. Then what happened with NASA and everything? Like, why did it go down so much?
After the NASA accomplished its main objective under Dr. Werner von Braun and his German team, by delivering man to the moon, it fell out of favor with the American public. And then came the advent of Skylab, which was a orbital space laboratory, and it eventually fell out of orbit in other projects. Mm-hmm. So it was no longer the forefront of the national objective.
So jobs left town.
Yes, layoffs at NASA occurred, and the space industry began its decline at that point. But there is a defense industry here, so that sustained the community. The U.S. Army's Missile Defense Agency is headquartered at Redstone Arsenal.
So you're downtown here. I haven't seen one homeless person. I've seen no trash. Is that the story here, or what's going on?
There was a major effort to revitalize the downtown area, beginning over 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, this is beautiful. These old buildings are really well kept.
Harrison Brothers Hardware, established in 1879, oldest hardware store in Alabama. My daughter has her products on display in there.
Oh, cool. What are they?
She makes essential oil candles in vintage china vessels.
Many young people here?
They are now. Used to not be that way. There's been a huge effort to attract young professionals to the city. In 1975, 76, if you had $10 on a Friday night, you could put half a tank of gas in your 1966 Pontiac GTO convertible. You could go to the drive-in theater with a date. You could get in and pay for 2 tickets. You could have 2 friends in the trunk of the car. Okay, so they got in for free. You could go in and park at this drive-in theater. You hung the speaker in the window, and you could go inside the stand, and you could buy a bag of popcorn and some sodas, and have a 6-pack of Wiedemann's beer that cost $1.89. Go back to the car, eat popcorn, drink Cokes and beer, and you had money left over. And that's the truth.
So that was your favorite time period here?
It was.
The 70s.
The 70s. The social landscape of the South in this area was way different. For example, most of the state was dry. You couldn't buy any alcohol. If you did, you went to the bootlegger. In south of here, across the river in Morgan County, there was only one. Everybody knew him. They raided him once a year, took his 2 cases of beer away, paraded him under 5 deputies in handcuffs, and let him go the next day.
So
that's open for business.
That's why moonshine is a big thing, right?
Still is.
Still is.
Yeah, if you can find it. And that's the game. Because actual moonshine, if it's made properly, they don't use radiators anymore from cars with lead.
Yeah.
You know about that, right? So they, as I understand it, it doesn't make you as ill as commercially produced alcohols were because it's pure.
Okay.
Albeit stronger.
Okay. So it's illegal, moonshine? Or
Yeah, for tax reasons. Only for tax reasons.
Okay, but no one really cares, right? They're not arresting people.
Yes, they are. Oh, yes, the ABC board in this state is.
Well, they're not going into your home and finding you.
For a while, before the microbreweries opened, one of my neighbors had a huge vat in his garage. He was the founder of the first microbrewery that I showed you, the Below the Radar, and he's a NASA engineer. I won't mention his name. But he was brewing at the house, and he was part of a super secret society of brewers that were all educated at the graduate and PhD level. And they're the ones that began the microbrewing operations in town when it became legal, 2009.
I mean, the liquor laws are more conservative here than Utah, than Salt Lake City.
Yes.
I think that they opened up earlier than you guys.
Right. This community was very resistant. This is one of the main streets. These are the old structures of town, in the oldest part of town.
And so how did people have the money back then for this?
They owned land. They were wealthy business people.
Okay.
This is the Probst mansion. Dr. Probst was the chief pharmacist for Walmart. And he's a local pharmacist. He had his own drugstore here.
Okay.
Became that, and then they started their own pill manufacturing facility in the country, and they became billionaires. So they held the most personal asset in this community of anyone else.
Look at that
And so
one.
they host a lot of social events.
Well, look at these places. They're huge.
At one time, this one right here was a room and boarding house for young women in college, and you could live there cheaply.
There's a lot of money in Huntsville.
Yes. Tremendous.
So
amount of money.
old and new money.
Behind us, we pass the Masonic Twickenham. This is called the Twickenham District, is the Masonic Temple. And as a youth, I was in the Order of De Malay. I don't know if you've heard of that or not.
I haven't. That's under the Masonic
It's
label?
the young man's youth organization under the Masonic Temple. I was the master counselor of my chapter.
What was that like?
It was deeply versed in the Masonic order, although we were not permitted to know the Masonic order's ritual. And it was in a Scottish Rite Temple, and so I wore a white cape with the emblem of the Crusaders on it. It was the Knights Templar organization.
Emblem of the Crusaders?
The Knights Templar.
Huh.
Jacques de Molay was a Knights Templar. He actually existed, and he was killed and burned at the stake by the Spanish Inquisition. So we would replicate those actions through what we call rituals and reenact them inside the chapter.
Like you're reenacting the killing.
Exactly. We all had to memorize. The entire ritual is committed to memory. In the center of the room is an altar with the Holy Bible. We had the flower talk to honor our mothers. We talk about honoring mothers and family. It was to teach young men to be grown men and head of families.
Okay.
And follow all the principles essentially as outlined in the Bible.
Are you glad you did it?
Absolutely.
Gave a lot of good structure?
Yes. And so, I mean, forever, I will always hold that. I was a past master counselor and representative of De Malay. They gave me a special pin, so I'm a subset of a higher order within that organization.
Okay.
As I got older, of course, I was out of the organization. They did try to recruit me, and they told me to postpone college and join the Masonic order, and that they would, at some point, if things went right, take care of my college needs to ascend you higher into their organization.
So why aren't you in the Freemasons now?
Because I went to college and I went into Army ROTC and became an officer on my own. And I just broke away from it. We're now headed up Montesano Mountain. This is the highest elevation point in the city. Many of the Germans that worked for NASA, the founding members, had property up here, as did my grandfather, because it reminded them of Germany. The temperature differential is about 5 degrees in the summertime. They could sit up here in their balcony with binoculars and look at the launch pad stands, the test stands. And they were minimalist. They didn't live in the big houses.
So all these new big homes are just new big homes?
Exactly. The older ones that are small, that's where the Germans
Like that little one?
Yes. And this one right here. My mother pointed out this home in particular. There was one German engineer, and I forget his name, but he lived there. And she kept saying, up until he passed away, he's one of the team members, he could have lived in a much nicer home. But he probably had his furniture from the 1950s in there, and nothing new. That's typical.
Just frugal.
Frugal.
Saving it.
Waste nothing. Absolutely. In that house. That's the one she keeps talking about.
What'd they do with their money? They were getting paid well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So what'd they do?
Invested. Hid it. Some of the Germans, and I've been to them, you know, there's a book out called The Bomb Shelters of Madison County. Because of the Soviet threat in the 60s, they built their own bomb shelters in their basements or in the backyards. And there's a publication out entitled as such. And I've gone to estate sales. Every now and then you'll stumble across another Cold War bomb shelter in someone's backyard or in their basement. I mean, hardened walls, 4 feet thick, hand-poured concrete. They did it all themselves in secret. They were so concerned about the Russians, even while they lived here.
Those were the times, right? You were doing drills at school under the desk, right?
Yes.
Like that
Yeah,
was
the
gonna do
60s.
anything?
The 60s, absolutely. And so the Germans, my grandfather didn't do it, but many of them built bomb shelters, complete with provisions and radios. They were big into ham radio.
Well, they knew what war was.
Oh, yeah. And they know what the Russians are, militarily. And that's my personal experience as an officer in Europe in the 1980s, on the border.
What was it?
Well, the Soviet Union, the Russian people, and even the East Germans do not conduct themselves in accordance with the same morals and values that we do as a Western society. They have a low, poor regard for human life. This is the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. I don't know what that is. Could be a booster phase. It's a booster for something.
What about that one over there?
I don't know the model of that either. That's an earlier version. I know on the top, it's called the cue ball. You see on the top of the capsule?
Yep.
You see that spire on top?
Yep.
That's the emergency jettison device. So if the rocket fails on launch, the crew can ignite a booster rocket that's on top, and it separates the capsule with the astronauts in it away from the failing.
The very top part?
The very
there?
top, yeah.
Okay.
And so then deploy parachutes as the rocket is ascending. Say it has a failure of a main propulsion system, and it begins to lose power or the bottom blows up. Well, the crew has an escape tool. And my grandfather worked on those designs, because I have some of those documents, handwritten notes.
So where is NASA right now? I mean, isn't it all SpaceX?
NASA has made the decision to basically no longer produce, internally manufacture launch platforms per se, although they have the Artemis. I think it was the Artemis missile that they launched recently. But that's using, again, commercial construction, okay? It's all farmed out to contract. So you just can't venture into space from this country without approval from the organizations that control access to space as viewed by our administration. And they've turned over, future spaceflight potential development technologies to commercial development.
Why do you think they've lost their mojo?
I really don't know. I don't know the answer. It's probably an economic tool to encourage commercialization of space travel for either research or travel or any other means, or military.
Because NASA was such an exciting organization back in the day.
Yes, it was.
Like it was,
And the next push is sending man to Mars.
and that's Elon.
That's correct. They have a German beer garden festival in here in the summer months. I believe it's on Thursdays. It's not truly authentic German food, but it's the best they can do. And you can come in and you can dine underneath the Saturn V rocket that's on display inside. And you can stand and admire an actual V-2 missile from World War II.
That's the V2 right
That's
there.
a V-2, yes.
Okay.
That's a real one. And the engine is set aside also, if you look. I can see it.
Theo gets pretty pumped with it.
That's the V2 engine right there. That's the propulsion system. Kind of hard to see, but it's my favorite spot out here.
Okay, so what were you saying about documents?
There's an effort spearheaded by relatives of the original team members to collect all of the personal data, photographs, family history, work history. They used to be stored here, and they used to have a huge display of those people, the Germans, in Cape Kennedy, Canaveral, and here in 1960s and 70s in the main building. But I was told that a lot of that material was getting destroyed in unusual fires in a storage building in the back of this complex. So I personally resisted the effort to turn over any documents.
You have a lot of documents?
I have them in the trunk of the car. Just wanted to show them to you. There's some of them. We'll have to do it like this. This is a Das Mars Project, written by Dr. Werner von Braun. Okay? And so this book is actually a little weather-worn, but this was his thesis on the flight to Mars. And here's where he signed it to my grandfather, Werner von Braun, in 52.
Von Braun?
Yeah, that's an original signature. 52, thanking him for his participation. And this is
Das
Werner von
Mars
Braun.
Project.
Yeah, this is his thesis on flight to Mars. And it's all in German.
Elon Musk would probably love this, right?
Yeah, there's only a few of these that exist, and most of them are in the Sanctuary Library at UAH. So, I mean, look, he worked all this out. Sorry. Von Braun worked out the orbital data. I mean, it's just amazing. All this was done the slide rules. Here's a very rare book. It's on the V2 rocket. You see the profile of the rocket on the front, and it's in German, written by Dr. Dornberger. And so, I mean, it's just a very old book. It's a dissertation on the V2 rocket. It's an actual photograph from Peenemünde. And that's an actual tactical launch of one in the woods, you see. And so there's a diagram of the V2. If you could read technical German, it's all in German. You would have a great time with this book. Here's photographs of the Peenemünde, the test site where they were on the EC, OC. And here's one with wings. I don't really know what that is. The A9, okay. So I was told, my grandfather told me, the next level of development was the A9 and the A10. That was past the V2. And it has wings. And so I've slowly over time tried to collect data on that development. And what he told me at the time, as I recall, was that the A9, A10 was the move towards a multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile. The V2 is a single-stage rocket. The Saturn V is a multi-stage moon delivery platform. It drops the booster off, and then it continues on with the next level of boosters and goes. So the V2 stays together intact in its entire flight. The next level was the A9, A10. Some of that's documented in this book, and that was to be a two-stage rocket. The goal, which never came to fruition, look at these guys, never came to fruition, was to build a two-stage intercontinental ballistic missile to carry some type of massive warhead. And the problem at the time, as my grandfather said, was guidance systems. That, they didn't have the technology to deliver a pinpoint, strike, to a target set. And so that information is still shrouded in secrecy, I believe, although they were developing that technology. So they were planning to have a crew fly the second stage to the target. And he showed me on a globe. I have the globe at home. He took his finger and he said the range would be from here, and he went to the right, which is over into the Middle East somewhere, which no one really cares about. He swung his finger over the top through the Soviet Union, kind of lingered over Moscow, and then his finger went over here towards the northeastern U.S. coast and put his finger directly on New York City. So that was a future target set: New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. for a two-stage intercontinental ballistic missile. To be flown, it would launch in the direction, and then it would separate from the booster stage, and minimal data that I've seen, but it would essentially skip off the atmosphere as a glider and be flown to the target by men.
And the Germans were working on that during World War II.
They were working on the spacesuit technology for that in World War II, and all that information that was garnered through human experimentation was captured by the United States and used in our spacesuit and high-altitude flight equipment designs. But that's an interesting book.
Oh, yeah.
Here's my grandfather's Project Paperclip contracts, his original contracts, documents. They were contractors. That's when they brought them over in Paperclip.
They were considered contractors.
Yes.
But they didn't have a choice.
Exactly. You can stay home in the rubble, or you can come to America and make a new life and help mankind. So, see, here's the contractor. That's his name, Theodore Fulva. This is a one-year contract from the War Department, 15 September 1945. Supplemental agreements, here, $5,400.
A year.
A year.
Which was big back then, huh?
Oh yeah, that's a lot of money. These are the slide rules that he used when they were building the V2 rockets. This is how they did their computations. This is personal slide rule in Germany, during the early years of missile programs in Germany. Oh, yeah. Drafting tools. I love it. Look at nails.
Oh, cool.
This is drafting set. So tools of the trade. That's my mother.
Space hostess Gisela.
Yeah.
Your mom.
She was 22.
You often discussed what in the family?
Well, what exposure, if any, did NASA have to any instance of the possibility of like alien intelligence? And so it is documented in a particular publication, Dr. Werner von Braun speaking to one of the astronauts, and I forgot which one, but he told him while smoking a cigarette outside one of the hotels in Cocoa Beach, Florida, that he said, "We know we're being monitored by an alien intelligence." That was Werner von Braun. And another thing of note that was passed down, this is all verbal history.
Sure.
You know about the incident at Roswell, New Mexico? The crash?
It's foggy, yes.
Yeah, and it was a big national security issue, and the Army's report on that was that it was a crashed weather balloon.
Mm-hmm.
If you look, and they had pieces of metal that couldn't be destroyed or broken, but it bent easy. It crumpled up, but it was indestructible.
Right.
And a large cleanup event and secured site. No one could go in. A lot of people disappeared later in life, and this and that. So. You still see it on television. It's being addressed all the time. It's the original alien crash theory, and so it was relayed to me verbally through the descendants of the team members. Okay, if that was just a weather balloon crash, then why was Dr. Werner von Braun immediately secreted away to that crash site? Why would he have to be there to look at a weather balloon? What was it? Exactly, and that's verbal knowledge, because amongst their social group of the first generation descendants of the German team, that's discussed, amongst them. Something to think about.